Our next speaker was recognized as one of the top motivational speakers in 2022 by Yahoo Finance. He's the founder and CEO of a company called Common Goal, in which he's inspiring and helping people to take on and make that common goal in their lives. He's been recognized by Brains Media, Swayze, Authority Mag, like we could go on. But you probably know him as one of the great buyer specialists of all time. Please help me in welcoming in the biggest way yet, Mr. Nick Prefontaine.
Nice suit.
When I had to learn how to walk again at the age of 14, I had no idea that the first step I took was not with my feet, but with my mind. Making the decision to take one step was my first step. I also had to learn how to how to talk and eat again while relearning how to walk. I had no memory or recollection of how I used to do things. Things like taking a shower had been erased from my memory, and I literally had to be taught that the water came before the soap. When learning how to walk again, my first steps wouldn't come until at least a month after my accident. The most important thing here, however, was that I did something. I took my first step without knowing it was my most important. On a February afternoon, my friends and I had just got to one of our most exciting days of the week, ski club. On our first run, the chairlifts went right over the train park where all of the jumps were. I knew, as soon as I saw it, that I had to go off the biggest jump in the train park. There wasn't even a moment of thinking, should I do it? Or maybe I shouldn't. I knew that was what I was doing. In my mind, it was a foregone conclusion. I was thinking about all that we would do after I landed that huge trick. Maybe grab a burger and fries in the lodge, or we could head over to the other chairlift for some runs on those trails. I was just happy to be there finally. I got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. Going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard on the snow, and that's the last thing that I remember. Due to the severity of my injuries, they wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital. They couldn't because it was too windy, so they sent in a helicopter. So they sent in an ambulance. Out of the 6 paramedics, there was only one who could intubate right on the spot, and I needed that to be able to breathe. He was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. There are several things that I still can't explain because of the accident. And now I know one of them is the reason why I'm here with you today. No matter the severity of your crisis, the decision you make to take action is your first step. Something else I learned was that my goggles were the only protection that my head had. With each subsequent hit after the initial impact, my goggles mysteriously moved to cushion each blow as I continued to roll down the mountain. I wore some pretty big goggles with a lot of padding. I never would have fathomed that I would need them to brace my fall. The school had to get in touch with my parents and have them meet me at the hospital. All they knew was that I'd been in an accident. My dad was the one that they were able to reach first. When he called my mom, he wasn't able to get alive, so he had to leave a message. As soon as he hung up, he realized that the message might panic her, so he called back and deleted it. When they both got to the hospital, they were totally shocked to see how rough of a shape I was in. My head and shoulder, where I made the initial impact, were bruised beyond comprehension. The doctors had to drill a hole for a shunt to be inserted into my brain to relieve the pressure. Without it, the pressure could have gone up and I would have died. At this point, I was out for the count, but I can only imagine what it must have looked like to see a doctor standing over me, foot on my chest, while he was drilling a hole into my head. After that point, I was resting in a partially induced coma, unable to communicate with anyone. Each time the doctors would come into my room to share progress updates, my parents would usher them out of the room. They knew that even though I was in a coma, I was still taking in information. Especially in the early stages, these updates from the doctors were not very positive. They had to give them the worst case scenario. Once out of the room, the doctors told my parents that I would probably never walk, talk, or eat on my own ever again. Even if I was able to come out of my coma, there was a good chance that I would need 24-hour care for the rest of my life. They didn't accept this, like so many patients do, as a death sentence. They took the information, thanked the doctors, and allowed me to treat it like any other situation. This was no different than any other challenge that I had faced up to this point in my life. Really, I didn't see the difference. As soon as I was aware of my surroundings and the work that was left in front of me, I got up, did the best that I could, and I kept getting better every day. This support was instrumental in laying the foundation for the rest of my recovery. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was starting to use the very framework that would help me to achieve and overcome any obstacle throughout my life. We're so fortunate at Common Goal to be able to share that with the rest of the world. That is the STEP system. The STEP system is what we created and I unknowingly used. Let's start with S for support. Support. Make sure that you have the support of your family and friends. This frees up so much of your mental energy to focus on accomplishing your objective. It might sound overly simplistic, but this very act of getting everyone on board at the start can save you hours and hours of actual time, worry, and frustration in the future. You're going to want to have an advocate. Who can you rely on in your time of need? For me, it was my parents, given that I was 14 years old. It doesn't matter how old you are, and that advocate doesn't have to be your parents. It can be a close friend that you share everything with. It can be your partner, husband, wife, or spouse. It's different for everyone, just like everyone is different. Reach out and share what's happening in your life. By reaching out and sharing the intimate details of what you're going through, you will open the doors to community support. That advocate can help organize all of your doctors and therapists with a common goal. Schedule weekly meetings to keep everyone pulling in the same direction. Each one of your therapists needs a very specific goal, and that is something that you craft together based on where you are at. It's accountability. If they know that they're going to be meeting with you on Fridays, then they want to accomplish what they said they were going to. This is where having a team becomes so important. Once you have that support, and it can be 1 or 10, it doesn't matter. Make sure that you are never alone. This helps so much because without it, your mind has a possibility to play tricks on you and be negative. You could have your advocate in place and your team lined up, but if you're not willing to receive the support, it'll all be for nothing. It's okay to receive help at different points in your life. In fact, we all help one another, and that's one of the beauties of being alive. The times that you feel that you don't need the support is often the times that you need it the most. Your advocate can get help from the rest of your team to place positive affirmations around you. Positive affirmations around your room always supports growth. When I was in the hospital, my parents had affirmations on every wall in my room. To give you an idea, one of my affirmations was, with each step I take, I'm getting closer and closer to accomplishing my goal. They made a decision for me that I was going to have a positive mindset before I could make it for myself. This is something that your advocate can do for you early on in the process. Even if you didn't have a supportive family growing up, you can still build the foundation from any point in your life. There was a short period when I came out of my coma in the ICU. I had my eyes open. I know because I've seen videos of myself there. I've gone back and visited the ICU since. Although I can't consciously remember being there, everything looks so familiar. Everything from the layout of the floor of the rooms, right down to the faces of the doctors and nurses. I feel like I know them, and I've been there before, but I just can't seem to put my finger on it. After a month, I was transported to a rehab hospital in Boston. Initially, I resided on the 3rd floor, which was reserved for the most critical of cases. I hardly have any memory of being on the 3rd floor, and that's because they were in the process of taking me off of all the drugs and medication from a partially induced coma. I still had a long road to go. The most that I could do was sit up in bed, supported by 3 nurses, for only 8 minutes at a time. After that, I was sweating like I had just ran 6 miles. Although these nurses probably didn't appreciate me sweating all over them in these 8 minutes, this was one of my first steps. I didn't cling to my suffering. I chose not to look at the end result, which was the medically driven, inevitable outcome that could have catapulted me into overwhelm. An overwhelm of machines, doctors, what ifs, whens, and catastrophic thinking. I had lost all control of the situation in front of me, much like we can't control the hand that we're dealt. We can't control getting into an accident, the death of a loved one, being physically or sexually abused as a kid, but we can control what our next step is going to be. The times that we don't take any steps is where we become stuck. We become paralyzed. Instead, I focused on the present moment in front of me and took one step at a time. I kept taking the next step and the next, and less than 60 days later, I ran out of the hospital. Not a big deal, but since then I've run in 2 half marathons, a 10-mile race, and a 10K where I shaved 30 seconds off my per mile time. The next letter in the step system is T, and that stands for trust. Trust that the next step will make itself available to you once you take your first step. This also starts by trusting yourself. Trust that you have this desire or calling inside of you for a reason. Follow it. There are a few key elements of trust that I'd like to highlight. None more important than having blind faith. You have to take everyone at their word. When I was learning how to walk, talk, and eat again, I had to take everyone at their word. If the therapist asked me to do something, I would do it without questioning, is this really going to work, or should we do it another way? Then I started to become addicted to the progress that I was making, and I asked for more. What else can I do that will fast forward us toward our common goal? There are so many people who don't have the tools or strategies to move beyond their present circumstance. Whether that is a life challenge, crisis, or trauma, they don't believe that by simply taking their first step, they can move beyond it. Based on my personal experience of having to learn how to walk, talk, and eat again, I can tell you that once you take your first step, it allows the next step to become possible. Secondly, trust means being in integrity. You have to do what you say and say what you do. No exceptions. This isn't all sunshine and rainbows. This is going to be work, and it'll be worth it once you get through to the other side. I didn't have a word for this during my recovery, but this was very important. If I agreed to anything that they asked me to do, I followed it through to completion. You need to let go of all expectations. Focusing on minute by minute, hour by hour, and day by day helps eliminate overwhelm and allows you to implement the STEP system. When I first got into the accident, my parents asked, "When can you go home?" Instead, they reframed this and thought in terms of hours, days, and weeks, then the outcome became easier to see. Focus on what's in front of you. I did the work without an expectation of an immediate result. STEP. I was consistent in how I showed up. STEP. I celebrated daily achievements no matter how small. STEP. By continuing to move forward every day, I was building an unstoppable momentum. There are so many people who just don't have the tools or strategies to move beyond their present circumstance. They don't believe that by simply taking their first step, they can move beyond it. Based on my personal experience of having to learn how to walk, talk, and eat again, I can tell you that once you take your first step, it allows the next step to become possible. Part of what helped me run out of the hospital was the support that I received from my family. When I first got into the accident, my parents had a very specific goal in mind, and that was for me to make a full recovery. While I was in the coma, they had already set the wheels in motion for the rest of my recovery. Initially, and for the next 85 days, I always had someone with me. My mom would be with me every day, going to every therapy and doctor's appointment with me. Then my dad would come in and spend nights with me. This was my support in action, and it was one of the key ingredients of me not only making a full recovery, but running out of the hospital. When I was in the hospital, I saw that there were so many kids that didn't have the support that I had. They didn't have an advocate with them at all times, so they could easily fall into being a victim of circumstance. Without a consistent diet, a positive reinforcement in our lives, our minds can easily fall into playing the victim. It's human nature. My parents would share updates with all my friends, their families, and teachers who were always asking about me. At first, in the ICU, the only people that could see me was my family. It was important that they kept an open line of communication to my friends, families, and teachers because this opened the doors to community support. It allowed the community to rally around me and visit as soon as they were allowed to. Having my friends come see me was something I really looked forward to. It really lifted me up. I was starting from scratch. To give you an idea, after coming out of the coma, they asked me if I had a brother or a sister. Brother, I said. I didn't have one then, and I still don't have a brother. I have a younger sister that I'd apparently forgotten after the accident. Try as I might, I was never able to convince my parents to bring me that brother that I imagined. They were done after 2, they said. No more. Next, we're going to be diving into E of the STEP system, which stands for energy. Energy is one of my favorites to talk about, and that is because it is something that I focus on to this day. Energy, maintaining your energy, allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. We are all born with an innate knowing inside of us that keeps us healthy. Medication has the potential to get in the way of that. Obviously within reason here. That first night in the hospital cost $250,000. If it wasn't for modern medicine, I wouldn't be here today. However, there is a use, time, and place for everything. A month after my accident, when I came out of the ICU, was the time that we needed to allow the body to heal itself. You can invest in and commit to your energy with these types of therapies: meditation, qigong, mental health and wellness, exercise, recovery, Reiki, massage therapy, acupuncture, or other natural treatments. My parents had someone come in and perform Reiki on me. The hospital said no one had ever done that. After coming out of my coma, they wanted to get me off of the medication as soon as possible. They knew of the body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. This is impossible if you are constantly on medication. Unless it was absolutely critical to my survival, they opted not to have me on any medicine. Focusing on your energy is something that is within your complete control. Just like the final letter in the STEP system, P for persistence. Without persistence, all of the progress that you made up until this point will be fleeting. Persistence. Once you've taken your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. By continuing to move forward every day, you are building an unstoppable momentum. Persistence is a mindset. Some mindset tips for persistence include being unsatisfied with the mediocre, making conscious decisions to keep moving forward, keep showing up no matter what. When moments of doubt creep in, take a deep breath. I would start my day by having my occupational therapist teach me how to shower again. Then I would get dressed, and again, this was something that I had to learn all over again. That you put your underwear on before your pants. Then I had breakfast, and it was time to start physical, occupational, and speech therapy. After which you broke for lunch. It was at one of these lunches that a moment of doubt crept in. At the time, I was in a wheelchair, looking over my situation. I just couldn't figure it out. I remember turning to my mom and asking, am I ever going to be able to walk again? She didn't even hesitate. Of course you are. That's what we're doing here, so you can get everything back and we can go home. Step. She gave me the confidence to keep going forward, even when I didn't have it. After lunch, I would start the afternoon sessions of my therapies. Again, physical, occupational, and speech therapy. Yes, I had double sessions of therapy, 5 days a week. At the time, I was unaware that I was utilizing the STEP system to recover from my snowboarding accident. I was only 14 years old when I got into the accident, and I still had so much left to learn. I still feel that way to this day, and that's part of the reason why I keep learning, growing, and getting better every day. After running out of the hospital, it wasn't like my work was done. I had to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months, all summer long, in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my classmates. Also left out there that I had to get tutored all summer long, all throughout the rest of the summer. Looking back on it, though, it's a little surreal that only 18 months later, I was knocking on the doors of some distressed sellers that hadn't paid their mortgage in months, sometimes years. My job was to book meetings for our investor to meet with them about potentially buying their house. Looking back on this, I can see that it was a part of my recovery. Going door to door, helping people out of their unfortunate situation. All throughout my life, I've utilized the STEP system. Still unaware of it, in 2012, I developed a voice issue. I just knew something wasn't right with my voice as the summer wound down. I can remember being out to dinner, just my mom and I. Maybe someone had said something to me prior, but I just wasn't ready to hear it. She noticed that my voice sounded different. I remember brushing it off because I didn't want to accept it. And if we're not careful, we can all miss a step like this. Now, what caused this? You're supposed to chant your scripts before you get on the phone to prospect for new business. I use the term chant here as a bit of tongue-in-cheek because that's what you're supposed to do. I like to take everything to the extreme. That's who I am as a person. Trust me, I'm working on it. I interpreted that as, okay, I'm going to scream through my scripts. Not only will this get my energy up, but it will really reinforce the scripts so I know them in my bones. I thought I had found the secret to closing more deals as a realtor. Then came Columbus Day 2012 when I really noticed it. My desk faced some glass that looked out onto the rest of the office. I would scream the script 3 times before getting on the phone. On this day, on the 3rd time, my voice gave out, and I started laughing. I can remember catching my reflection in that glass. I can still see it, laughing and thinking, that's it. That's why my voice sounds different. From then on, I stopped the screaming of my scripts, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. Columbus Day was October 8th, 2012, and by the end of October, my voice wasn't coming back. I had previously seen my general physician who examined me and gave me a full physical. Step 1. All my vital signs are good, and he didn't see anything wrong with me. He recommended that I see an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Step 2. My dad went with me to see this doctor. Ooh, my God, did this guy have terrible bedside manners. Not warm at all, very blunt and gruff. He hit it right in the head with his diagnosis, though. He said, well, that's a very rare voice condition, and you'd best be served going directly to the voice specialist in Boston and start getting Botox injections into your throat to relieve the tension. Whoa! I thought, I'm not going to go to Boston and get Botox in my throat? That's such a big deal. It's a huge step. So I didn't go. Second misstep. I reasoned that we were just coming up to the holidays and I would take a break from prospecting and being on the phone until January 1st. Surely by getting all that rest, my voice will go back to normal. I also did something else that I was familiar with. Speech therapy on my own at a local hospital. Step 3. I had to learn how to talk again once. Why couldn't I do it again? I relied on what I knew had worked for me in the past. Taking one step at a time eliminates the overwhelm of how am I going to do this, and reframes it so that you have ease in effortless living until you reach your goal. I had an appointment with a local speech therapist who gave me voice exercises that I was to do every day. If she told me I was to do them twice a day, I was doing 4 times a day. Remember, I'm working on it. I started out seeing her once a week. Then it was twice a week. By the end of April 2013, I was seeing her 3 to 4 times a week. The exercises helped and gave me strategies for dealing with the issue, but nothing I ever did was really fixing it. I could have stopped here and given up. However, this practice of one step at a time is what I know to be the solution to all of life's problems. In May of 2013, I had a final appointment with them. They said that they have tried everything that they can think of, given me every exercise. And at this point, all that they could recommend is that I go and see the voice specialist in Boston. I finally gave in and scheduled an appointment with him. Dr. Philip Song. No, I'm not making that up. The voice specialist's name is Dr. Song. My appointment was the beginning of August 2013. For the past year, I built up what a monumental thing going to Boston was. I was blown away when Dr. Song walked in the room, heard me speak, and right away nonchalantly said, "Oh, that? Yeah, we deal with that all the time. We'll get it fixed in no time. See the front desk and schedule a Botox injection in a couple weeks." Shocked. I was sold, hook, line, and sinker. I got scheduled, and for the next 7 years, I received Botox injections. For my first injection, Dr. Song said, "Tilt your head back, and you should feel a pinch." A very little pinch, and 3 seconds later, Dr. Song said, "All set. See the front desk and schedule an appointment with one of our voice specialists or therapists in a couple weeks." I walked out of there in absolute awe. I had this buildup in my head as major surgery for the past year, and all it was a little pinch? Are you kidding me? I now had to work with this team to break down those layers of muscle and retrain myself to speak again. You see, those 6 months of screaming through my scripts had annihilated the muscles in my throat, and new ones had grown back over the course of a year as my body's response to deal with that. I now had to work with Dr. Song's team to break down those layers of muscle and retrain myself to speak again. If anyone had ever told me that you have to do something for 7 years, this would have been completely overwhelming. However, because I took one step at a time, I now have my voice back for the second time. It was at this point that I knew that I had a practice and a message to share with the world. All throughout my life, I have unconsciously been drawn to people that are in the midst of their own trauma or life challenge. The common goal, always to help them get through to the other side and to be able to thrive with the rest of their life. And that is where our company, Common Goal, was born from. What if all life was a series of next steps? How much more effortless and stress-free would life be if all you had to think about every day was just taking your next step? There is so much overwhelm in the world. This crisis fatigue can cause feelings of exhaustion, anger, despondency, fear, and even send us into analysis paralysis, preventing us from moving forward and into a life beyond our wildest dreams. The beauty is you don't need me or anyone at Common Goal to utilize this life-saving strategy. Go to nickprefontaine.com/step to download the STEP system for free today. Think about where you are stuck, challenged, or in crisis, and how you can take action today with one step. Whatever it is that you're going through, what's the first step that you can do to change it? And the next, and the next. You get the idea. Once you take your first step, there will always be a next step. Thank you.